Welcome to Deception Diaries, where real stories of betrayal and revenge come to light. Today's story is about Petter, a man whose perfect life was shattered just 7 months before his wedding. His fiancée, Catherine, seemed like the perfect partner, smart, beautiful, and loving. Until one trip to Miami changed everything. Suspicion crept in when the phone calls stopped, and when a friend sent him shocking photos, the truth hit like a freight train. What happens next is a tale of heartbreak, revenge, and the ultimate act of moving on. Stay tuned. You won't believe how he made her pay. Petter thought his life was finally falling into place. After 3.5 years together, he and Catherine had been engaged for a year. They were planning their dream wedding, and everything seemed perfect. The venue was booked, invitations were printed, and the countdown to their big day had begun. Catherine was everything Petter had ever wanted. Smart, kind-hearted, and stunningly beautiful. They had built a future together, sharing dreams of marriage and a family. Everyone admired their relationship, often calling them the perfect couple. But a few weeks before the wedding, Catherine and her friends decided to take a short trip to Miami. A last hurrah before the big day. It was supposed to be innocent fun, just a few days of shopping, sightseeing, and relaxation. Petter didn't think much of it. He trusted Catherine completely, and even joked with her about staying away from expensive attractions in Miami. She hugged him tightly at the airport, promising to call once she landed. Petter felt lucky, confident that their love could withstand any distance. But as soon as Catherine arrived in Miami, small cracks began to appear. The texts came less frequently. Calls became shorter, then stopped altogether. At first, Petter brushed it off. She's probably busy, he thought. But deep down, something didn't feel right. This was just the beginning of Petter's nightmare. The first day of Catherine's trip passed without much concern. She texted Petter to let him know she had landed safely and mentioned that she and her friends were going to a fancy dinner that night. Petter smiled at his phone, wishing her a good time and reminding her to send pictures. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. By the second day, things changed. Catherine's responses became less frequent and delayed, sometimes hours, later or not at all. Petter tried not to overthink it. She's just busy enjoying herself, he told himself, pushing away the growing feeling of unease. But that night, when he called her, she didn't answer. Not even a text to explain. That uneasy feeling in his gut tightened. The next morning, Petter received a call that changed everything. It was from his close friend Faizan, who lived in a nearby city. Petter was surprised to see Faizan's name on his screen since they hadn't talked in weeks. He answered the call with a cheerful tone, but Faizan's serious voice immediately made him sit up straight. "Petter, I don't know how to say this," Faizan began hesitantly, "but I saw Catherine last night." Petter frowned in confusion. "What are you talking about? Catherine's in Miami right now." "No, man. I'm in Miami too," Faizan admitted. "I'm here for a friend's bachelor party, and I saw her at a club on the Strip." A chill ran down Petter's spine. His heart began to race. "What do you mean you saw her? Are you sure?" "I'm sure, bro. I know what Catherine looks like. She wasn't alone. She was with some guy." Faizan's voice dropped, hesitating before adding, "They were holding hands, kissing." The words hit Petter like a punch, to the gut. He gripped his phone tightly, struggling to breathe. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it. "This has to be a mistake," he thought. But Faizan's voice was firm. "I'm sorry, man. If you don't believe me, I can follow her and get proof." Petter swallowed hard, his voice tense with barely contained anger. "Do it," he whispered. He gave Faizan the name of the hotel where Catherine was staying, and ended the call, his hands shaking. He wanted to believe this was all some misunderstanding, but, deep down, he already knew the truth. An hour later, Faizan called back. "Petter," he said in a hushed tone. "She's at the pool area of her hotel. She's with the same guy. I got pictures." Petter froze. His worst fear was now a reality. 5 minutes later, his phone buzzed with incoming images. He hesitated before opening them. When he finally did, his heart shattered. There she was, Catherine, sitting on a lounge chair with another man. Their bodies were close, her hands on him. In the next photo, they were kissing. Petter's mind went blank. The woman he trusted, the one he was about to marry, had betrayed him. He stared at the photos, the numbness giving way to a mixture of fury and heartbreak. He knew in that moment there was no going back. That night, Petter barely slept. He kept staring at the photos Faizan had sent, hoping they would somehow change or reveal a different truth. But they didn't. Catherine had betrayed him, and now he had to decide what to do. His mind was a storm of emotions: anger, disbelief, sadness. But as dawn approached, one feeling stood out: resolve. He wasn't going to be a victim. He would take control. The next morning, Petter sprang into action. He called the wedding venue first and canceled the booking. The deposit. Gone. It didn't matter. One by one, he canceled everything: the caterers, the photographer, and even the decorator. He called the local mosque to inform them that the date for the nikah was no longer needed. His voice was calm, almost cold, but inside he felt like his world was falling apart. Next, he called his family. His mother answered, excited as usual, asking how wedding preparations were going. Petter took a deep breath and said, "Ami, I need to tell you something. The wedding is off. Catherine cheated on me." There was stunned silence on the other end before his mother gasped. "What? What are you saying? How could this happen?" "I don't want to get into details right now," he replied, his tone flat. "But it's over. I can't marry her." His mother began crying, and his father took the phone, offering quiet support. Petter explained the situation briefly and assured them that he was okay. After that, he informed his brothers and a few close cousins to spread the word so people wouldn't be blindsided by the sudden cancellation. Once that was done, Petter turned his attention to the house. He called a locksmith and had all the locks changed. Catherine would no longer have access to his life or his home. Within an hour, the new keys were in his hands. He then began packing all of Catherine's belongings: her clothes, shoes, makeup, and even the small decorative items she had placed around the house. Every piece of her life in his home went into boxes. But one box was different. Inside it, he placed the printed photos Faizan had sent. The undeniable proof of her betrayal. He made sure they were right on top, so they would be the first thing Catherine saw. On the outside of the box, he wrote in bold letters, "Open me." By the time he was done, the house felt different. Empty, like all traces of their life together had been erased. And that was exactly what Petter wanted. He moved all the boxes to the front yard, positioning the one with the photos in front. Then, with a heavy heart, he grabbed his bags, packed them into his car, and drove off to rent a vehicle for the day. Petter wasn't finished yet. He wanted to witness Catherine's reaction when she returned. He parked the rental car a few blocks away and waited across the street, hidden but close enough to see everything. His phone buzzed with a message. From Catherine. "Hey baby, I just landed. Taking a taxi home now. Can't wait to see you," she wrote. Petter smirked bitterly. She had no idea what was waiting for her. "Okay, see you soon," he replied, playing along one last time. 15 minutes later, a yellow taxi pulled up in front of the house. Petter watched as Catherine stepped out, dragging her suitcase behind her. The moment she saw the boxes on the lawn, she froze. Even from a distance, Petter could see the panic on her face. She hesitated, looking around in confusion. Then she dropped her suitcase and ran to the front door, fumbling with her keys. When the door wouldn't open, she tried again and again, until frustration took over. She began banging on the door, shouting, "Petter! Petter! Open the door! What's going on?" Petter remained seated in his car, watching silently. Realizing the door wouldn't budge, Catherine turned back to the boxes. That's when she noticed the one labeled "Open Me." Slowly, she walked over, ripped the tape off, and opened it. Petter watched as she pulled out the photos. Her face shifted, from confusion to shock, then horror. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pictures. Tears streamed down her face, and she collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Petter had seen enough. He got what he came for. Without another glance, he started the car, drove off to pick up his real one, and left town. That night, he checked into a hotel in a nearby city, far enough that Catherine wouldn't be able to find him. When he finally checked his phone, it was flooded with missed calls and messages. Almost 40 calls and countless texts from Catherine. "Please talk to me, Petter. I'm so sorry. I love you. Please let me explain," one message read. But Petter wasn't interested in explanations. He ignored every call and message. Now, it was time for the final step of his plan. Letting the world know the truth. He forwarded the incriminating photos to Catherine's parents and their mutual friends, everyone who had been invited to the wedding. Along with the photos, he attached a short message. "Catherine cheated on me in Miami. Here's why the wedding is off. This is who she really is." Within minutes, his phone buzzed with responses. Shocked friends and family expressed their sympathy and support. Some were furious at Catherine's betrayal. Others apologized for his heartbreak. Petter felt a brief pang of guilt. It was a harsh move. But the pain she caused him demanded the truth be known. The weight of betrayal began to lift as Petter realized he had taken back control. For the first time in days, he felt peace. The days following the confrontation were a blur. Petter stayed in the hotel, cutting off all communication with Catherine. The missed calls and messages kept flooding in, but he didn't open a single one. He needed time. Time to breathe, time to heal, and time to figure out what came next. At first, the weight of what had happened still lingered. He replayed every moment in his mind. The betrayal, the lies, and the gut-wrenching pain of seeing those photos. But with each passing day, something changed. The anger and heartbreak slowly gave way to clarity. Petter began to see things differently. He realized that he hadn't lost someone who truly loved him. He had lost someone who had already let him go the moment she betrayed him. His family and close friends checked in on him frequently. His mother, who had been devastated by the news, offered her constant support. "You did the right thing, Beta," she assured him over the phone. "You deserve someone who values you." Faizan also reached out. "How are you holding up, man?" he asked. "I'm good," Petter replied honestly for the first time in days. "Better, actually. I don't regret anything. If it wasn't for you, I might have ended up marrying someone who didn't deserve me. So thank you." "Anytime, bro," Faizan said. "You did what you had to do." Petter reflected on those words. For so long, he had defined his happiness around Catherine and their future together. But now, he was rediscovering himself. He started focusing on things he had once put aside: hobbies, work, and spending time with people who uplifted him. He even went on a few casual dates, not looking for anything serious, but just to remind himself that loyalty and trust still existed. The house he had shared with Catherine no longer held any meaning for him. After a few weeks, he made the decision to sell it. Holding on to the past wouldn't help him move forward. As the house was listed for sale, Petter felt a sense of closure. He was finally letting go of the memories and the pain tied to that place. He also realized that he didn't miss Catherine. He missed the person he thought she was, the person who had never truly existed. That understanding gave him a sense of peace. He no longer felt burdened by anger or sorrow. Petter knew he had come a long way from the shattered man who had stared at those photos in disbelief. He was stronger now, ready to embrace a new chapter in his life, one built on self-worth, trust, and the knowledge that he deserved better. One evening, there was a knock on Petter's door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Curious, he walked over and opened it. His eyes widened slightly, and his expression hardened. It was Catherine. She looked nothing like the confident, polished woman he once knew. Her hair was a mess, her eyes swollen from days of crying, and her face was pale with desperation. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "How did you find me?" Petter asked, crossing his arms. Catherine hesitated, nervously shifting her weight. I hired a private investigator," she admitted softly. Petter raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "Seriously?" "I had to see you," she whispered. "I had to talk to you." Leaning against the doorframe, Petter's voice was cold. "Talk? About what, Catherine? Her lip trembled. Petter, please. I made a mistake. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking straight. Petter let out a bitter chuckle, shaking his head. Drunk? That's your excuse? You knew exactly what you were doing. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped closer. I was scared, okay? Scared of commitment, of marriage. I got caught up in the moment. I didn't mean to hurt you. Caught up in the moment? Petter scoffed. How long did that moment last? A few hours? The whole trip? Don't tell me you were scared of commitment when you planned a wedding. With me for over a year. You weren't scared. You were selfish. Catherine broke down, sobbing. I love you, Petter. I can't lose you. Please, can't we fix this? Petter stared at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with both pain and resolve. No, Catherine. You don't love me. You love the idea of me, of the security and the life we built. But if you truly loved me, you wouldn't have done this. Her hands clenched into fists as she struggled to respond. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking, she whispered again. Petter shook his head slowly. Being drunk doesn't erase your commitments, Catherine. It doesn't make you forget the person waiting for you at home. It just makes it easier to do what you already wanted to do. And you weren't drunk when you were kissing him by the pool, so save the excuses. Catherine flinched as though his words physically hit her. Her voice cracked as she begged, Please, Petter. Can't we just talk? Just give me one more chance. Petter took a step back. We're over, Catherine. We've been over since the moment you betrayed me. I can't go back to someone who doesn't value loyalty or trust. Her face crumbled in anguish. She let out a broken sob. Please. Petter sighed deeply, gripping the door. He looked at her one last time, the woman he once thought he would spend his life with, and felt nothing but detachment. Don't bother me again. With that, he said softly. He closed the door. For a moment, he stood there in silence, listening. There was no more knocking, no more pleading, just the quiet peace that followed. Petter exhaled slowly. For the first time in months, he felt truly free. As Petter stood behind the closed door, he reflected on how far he had come. The pain that once consumed him was now just a distant memory. The person who had hurt him so deeply was no longer a part of his life, and he was finally ready to move forward. He spent that night journaling his thoughts, something he hadn't done in years. Writing out his emotions gave him a sense of release. He wrote about his heartbreak, the betrayal, and most importantly, the lessons he had learned. One of the biggest lessons? Never compromise on trust and self-respect. The following week, Petter finalized the sale of the house. Handing over the keys to the new owners felt symbolic, as if he were leaving behind the remnants of his old life. There was no point holding on to a place filled with painful memories. He moved into a new apartment in a different city. A fresh start in every sense. Petter also reconnected with old friends he had neglected during his relationship. They welcomed him back without judgment, happy to see him rebuilding his life. He even joined a local gym and took up hobbies he had once loved, like photography and hiking. Slowly but surely, he was finding joy again. One day, while scrolling through social media, Petter noticed a flood of messages from friends and relatives, expressing their admiration for his strength. People commented on how he had handled the situation with dignity, refusing to tolerate betrayal. It wasn't easy, but Petter felt proud of the choices he had made. He also began to open his heart again. Though he wasn't in a rush to find a new relationship, he had met a few women through mutual friends. These interactions reminded him that there were still good, loyal people in the world. He no longer feared love, but understood the importance of patience and trust. Eventually, Faizan called again to check in. Petter, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, man. You handled everything like a champ. Thanks, Faizan, Petter replied with a smile. Honestly, I feel like I'm finally in a good place. No regrets. That's what I like to hear, Faizan said. You deserve all the happiness, bro. As Petter ended the call, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Despite the pain he had endured, he had emerged stronger and wiser. He knew now that life wasn't defined by the people who hurt you, but by the way you rise after the fall. With peace in his heart, Petter looked toward the future, ready for whatever came next. Petter knew his journey was far from over, but he had reached a turning point. The person he had become after this experience was stronger, wiser, and more resilient. He no longer carried the weight of Catherine's betrayal. Instead, he saw it as a painful lesson that had shaped him for the better. Reflecting on the events, Petter realized that healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about acceptance. He had learned to accept that people could betray trust, that life didn't always go according to plan, and that sometimes walking away was the only path to self-respect. Now, as he shared his story on a platform like Deception Diaries, he hoped it could inspire others going through similar pain. His advice was simple but powerful. Never let someone else's betrayal define your worth. Walk away when respect and trust are broken. You deserve better. He reminded viewers that there is life after heartbreak. It may not feel that way at first, but with time and self-reflection, peace and happiness become possible again. To those still struggling with betrayal, he offered words of encouragement. Keep your head up, focus on healing and growth. Surround yourself with people who uplift you. And most importantly, never settle for anyone who doesn't value loyalty and honesty. Petter ended his reflection with a sincere smile. He had survived the storm and was ready to thrive in a future he built on his own terms. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found it relatable or helpful, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to Deception Diaries for more stories of overcoming betrayal.